The man who walked away from you or slowly disappeared without a real explanation is thinking about you more than he's showing. That's the truth sitting underneath all that silence. And it's the part nobody says out loud. You've been looking at his absence and building a story around it, that he made his choice, that he moved on without looking back, that whatever the two of you had clearly didn't leave a mark on him the way it left one on you. You've been sitting with that story long enough that it started to feel like fact. But that story is not as solid as it feels. And the reason it matters that you understand this isn't so you can chase him down or spend another night reading into his behavior. It's so you stop quietly using his silence to decide that you weren't worth missing, because you were. And somewhere on his side of that silence, he already knows it. Here's what nobody tells you about a man who walked away or slowly faded out. He doesn't fall apart in the ways you'd recognize. He doesn't send the long message breaking everything down. He doesn't show up somewhere looking like a person who lost something real. He just goes quiet, stays busy, keeps his life looking full and normal from the outside. And from where you're standing, that looks like peace. It looks like someone who made a decision and is genuinely fine with it. But most of the time, that's not what it is. That's a man who doesn't know what to do with what he's actually carrying. And what he's carrying is more than he's letting anyone see. This video is going to walk you through exactly what's going on beneath that surface. How to recognize when a man is living with regret he hasn't said out loud yet. And what that means for how you carry yourself going forward. Like and subscribe before we go any further, because the first thing we're about to get into reshapes how you read every single interaction that comes after it. Most women do the same thing when a man goes quiet after things fall apart. They turn the silence inward. They go back over everything, every conversation, every moment something felt a little off. Every time they wonder if they said the wrong thing or wanted too much or gave too little. They build a quiet case against themselves. They start treating his distance like a verdict. Like he looked at everything she was and decided it wasn't quite enough. And once that story takes hold, it changes things. It changes how she holds herself. It changes whether she believes anything good is still coming. It changes how she talks about what happened when someone asks. But that story is built on a shaky foundation. His silence is not a judgment of your value. His silence is information about what he can handle and how he deals with things that are hard for him. And those two things are not the same at all. A man who goes quiet after losing someone good isn't quiet because she didn't matter. He's quiet because sitting with loss and being honest about it is something most men were never taught how to do. So instead, they do what feels easier. They stay busy. They act like things are fine. They wait for the feeling to get smaller or turn into something they can live with more comfortably. And sometimes it never does. Sometimes it just stays there, quiet, heavy, real. That's what regret looks like in a man who isn't going to say it directly. And it doesn't disappear just because he's acting like everything is normal. So before you keep reading his silence as proof that you were forgettable, I want you to understand what his regret actually looks like on the surface. Because it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't look like sadness or weakness or anything you'd immediately name. It looks like small, ordinary, everyday things that are easy to brush off if you don't know what they mean. And the first one is something you've probably already noticed but convinced yourself meant nothing. He finds small ways to stay close even though nothing official is happening between you. It's not big or obvious. It's not something you can easily point to and say, look, this clearly means something. It's subtle. He watches your stories but doesn't say anything. He likes a photo from 3 weeks ago at a strange hour. He sends you something small, a video, a meme, something that reminded him of you. and he tries to make it sound completely casual, like it was nothing, like he was just passing it along. Or he replies to something you posted with a short, friendly message that keeps just enough distance to feel safe, but still puts him in your space. And you look at all of that and tell yourself, he's just being normal. He's just keeping things friendly. It doesn't mean anything real. But here's what's actually going on. A man who has truly moved on and genuinely stopped thinking about you doesn't do any of that. He doesn't need to. He's not showing up on the edges of your world because he's bored or because it's habit. He's doing it because letting go completely feels like more than he's ready to do right now. Every small way he stays connected is him quietly keeping the door from fully closing. He's not ready to walk all the way through it. That's not the behavior of someone who doesn't care. That's the behavior of someone who cares and hasn't figured out what to do with it yet. Now, that doesn't mean you should act on it immediately or that this automatically becomes a good thing for you. We're going to get to that. But understanding that this behavior actually means something is the first step to reading the situation with clear eyes, instead of reading it through the fog of your own self-doubt. The second thing that shows up when a man is carrying regret he won't say out loud is a very specific kind of attention to your life. Not surface level attention, not small talk, real attention. He remembers things. He asks about something you mentioned weeks ago and brings it back up now. He asks how it went, how you're feeling about it, what happened with that situation you were dealing with. He listens to your answer in a way that feels genuinely different from how most people listen. He's not half there. He's not waiting for his turn to speak. He's actually with you in the conversation, taking in what you're saying, responding to the real thing, not just the surface of it. That kind of attention doesn't come from politeness. It comes from still caring. A man who stopped thinking about you a long time ago doesn't put that kind of energy into knowing what's going on in your life. He doesn't ask the questions that show he's been paying attention. He doesn't remember the details. He's not doing any of that to fill space or be nice. He's doing it because somewhere in him, knowing you, knowing what's happening for you, still matters. He's not fully gone. He's just not saying that out loud. And the reason he's not saying it out loud is almost always one of two things. He doesn't know how to, or he's not sure it would be welcome. Both of those are worth understanding, because a lot of what looks like him not caring is actually just him not knowing how to say that he does. The third sign is a little less obvious because it looks almost like the opposite of what you'd expect from someone carrying feelings. He gets uncomfortable when you mention someone new in your life. Not in a big dramatic way, not in a way that's easy to call out, but you can feel it if you're paying attention. You bring up someone you've been spending time with or a date you went on, and something in him shifts. He gets a little quieter, a little more careful. He asks about it in a way that's trying hard to sound casual, but has a little too much interest behind it. Or he changes the subject just slightly too fast for it to feel completely natural. This is not someone who is at peace with things being over. This is someone who still has real feelings in the picture and can't quite keep them from showing. Because here's the thing about that particular kind of discomfort. You cannot feel it about someone you've genuinely moved past. It's not possible. Real indifference doesn't produce that reaction. So when you see it, even when it's small, even when he covers it quickly, that's one of the clearest signs available to you that the feelings didn't actually leave when he did. They stayed. They're still there. He just hasn't worked out what to do with them. Now, here's the part where a lot of women lose their footing. They start seeing these signs and they do one of two things. Either they convince themselves it means nothing, go back to the story that he doesn't care, and keep carrying that story around like it's protecting them from getting hurt again. Or they swing all the way to the other side, start reading into everything, start building it into something much bigger than what's actually there, and end up making choices from hope instead of from reality. Neither of those is the right place to be. The right place sits in the middle. These signs mean something real, but what they mean is not a love story about to start back up. What they mean is that he still has feelings he hasn't finished working through. And what you do with that information has to come from what you actually want, not from what his unspoken feelings are pulling you toward. This is where your clarity matters more than his feelings. Because here's the thing most people skip straight past. When a man regrets losing you, that says something about you. It says that what you brought to his life was real. It was worth something. It wasn't easy to replace or easy to stop thinking about. And that's important for you to know, not so you can use it as a weapon or hold it over anyone, but so you can stop second guessing what was actually there between you. You didn't imagine it. You weren't too much. You weren't some version of yourself that pushed him away. You were someone who mattered. And that doesn't disappear just because things ended or faded or fell apart without a clean explanation. What disappears is the version of you that needed him to confirm it for you. And that shift, that moment where you stop needing his regret to tell you your own worth, that's the shift that changes everything. When you stop treating his feelings as something you need to either chase or explain away, and start treating them as just information, just one piece of a bigger picture, you stop being pulled around by them. You stop organizing your whole emotional state around what he might be thinking on any given day. You stop checking his activity and then feeling embarrassed for doing it. You come back to yourself, back to what you actually want, back to what you're actually trying to build. And from that place, you can look at this situation clearly instead of through either hope or old pain. So let's talk about what you actually do from here. If he's showing these signs, staying in your orbit in small ways, remembering details and asking real questions, getting a little off when you mention someone new, then there are a few different directions this can go. And which direction it goes depends more on you than on him. What do you actually want? Not what feels safe, not what would stop the longing, not what would make the uncertainty go away for a night. What do you genuinely, honestly want when you're being straight with yourself? Because some of you watching this want another real chance with this person. You felt something that was real, and you want to know if it can be better this time, built on something more honest than before. If that's where you are, the move isn't to sit in silence and wait for him to find his courage. The move is to create a real opening, not a confrontation, not a big emotional moment, just a clear, honest, low-pressure conversation where something real can actually be said. Something as simple as, I've been thinking about us lately, and I'm open to talking if you are. That's it. Clean and direct. No performance, no games. It either gets met with honesty or it doesn't. Either way, you know where you stand instead of standing in the fog. Some of you aren't sure what you want yet. You miss him, but you also remember clearly why things fell apart. You feel pulled by these signs, but you can't tell if it's the real connection pulling you or just the familiar feeling, the comfort of something known. If that's where you are, the move is to stop rushing toward an answer before one is ready. Give yourself the same space you've been giving him. Let your feelings settle before you act on them. A decision made from confusion almost always has to be unmade later. And that costs more than waiting a little longer for clarity. And some of you watching this have genuinely moved on. You're not trying to go back to what was, but knowing that he's carrying regret, knowing that what happened between you was real and worth something, that changes the story you've been telling yourself quietly. You can let that update things. You don't have to do anything with it. No reaching out, no revisiting, no reopening anything. You can just let it correct the record. You weren't foolish for caring. You weren't wrong about what you felt. And even though that chapter is closed, it wasn't nothing. It was real. And you were worth remembering. All three of those places are honest places to be. The only wrong place is the one where you're letting his unspoken regret sit in the driver's seat of how you feel about yourself day to day. Now let's get honest about the one mistake that shows up in all three of those situations. And it's probably not the one you're expecting. It's not reaching out too soon. It's not being too open or too available. It's not caring too much or saying too much. The real mistake is changing who you are based on what you think he wants to see now. Quietly editing yourself, going a little cooler, a little more distant, a little less like the real you, because somewhere along the way, you decided that the version of you that exists naturally was probably too much for him. And now you're managing yourself, performing something more controlled and more careful, something you think is easier to be around. And here's the cost of that. Even if it works, even if the more managed version of you gets his attention back, it's not actually you that gets it back. It's the performance. And that is not a good deal. You'd be starting over on a foundation that isn't real, which means the same cracks show up again just later and with more to lose. The version of him that is regretting losing you is regretting losing the real version of you, the one who was fully present and fully herself, not the one carefully monitoring her own energy before she says anything, not the one shrinking herself down to something more convenient. That woman isn't more attractive. She's just more careful. And careful doesn't stay with someone long after she's gone. Real does. Presence does. The woman who knows her own worth, who is warm without being desperate, who is open without being available to anything less than what she actually deserves, that's the one that's hard to stop thinking about. That's the version he's already regretting. And the answer is never to become a quieter version of her. The answer is always to become more of her. This is where a lot of women get genuinely turned around. They start thinking the real work here is figuring him out, decoding the signs, reading the behavior, understanding what he wants so they can be that. And while understanding what's happening around you matters, that's not where the real work lives. The real work is getting clear on what you want, what you know you're worth, and what you're actually willing to accept from here. Because a man who regrets losing you will find his way to you if there's a real possibility and if you give him room to do it honestly. But that only happens if you're standing fully in your own life, not hovering near the edges of his, waiting to find out if you're still wanted. Your life does not wait for his process to finish. That sounds simple, but living it takes real something, because the pull is real. When you still have feelings for someone and you can feel that they haven't fully let go either, it's natural to want to stay available, to not move too far forward in case something changes, to keep a part of yourself in a holding pattern. But that holding pattern has a cost that is easy to underestimate. It costs you time, it costs you energy, it costs you other possibilities, and it costs you the one thing that actually makes you most compelling in this situation, which is a life that is genuinely full and genuinely moving forward without him at the center of it. A man who sees that you kept living, that your world didn't stop, that you are building something real and going somewhere and not sitting still waiting for him to figure out his feelings. That man feels your value in a completely different way than any message you could send. Your life is the message. How you carry yourself is the message. The version of you that is genuinely okay, genuinely growing, genuinely full, that's the version that turns quiet regret into real action. That's what moves something from a feeling he's carrying privately into an actual honest conversation. So stop waiting for him to get there and put your full attention back on where you are going. Because the real question here was never, does he regret losing me? The real question has always been, am I building a life that I actually deserve? Am I showing up fully for myself? Am I moving in a direction that feels real and worth something? And when the answer to that becomes genuinely yes, the things outside of you have a way of sorting themselves out without you forcing anything. Either he shows up honestly and you get to decide from a place of real strength what you want to do with that, or he doesn't, and you are already so deep into something good that the loss doesn't hollow you out the way it once would have. That's not making peace with less. That's becoming someone who is genuinely difficult to walk away from and genuinely impossible to forget. So here's where everything lands. He's carrying something he hasn't said. You've been reading his silence as a final answer when it was never that. The signs have been there, quiet and easy to miss. Easy to talk yourself out of. And what you do with all of it is not really about him. It's about you getting clear, getting honest, and stepping fully back into your own life with everything you have. Not the part of your attention left over after you've spent the rest of it trying to figure out what he's feeling. You are not the person in this story who is waiting to find out if she mattered. You already know the answer. You knew it before his regret confirmed it. And you'll know it whether or not he ever says it out loud. So the only real question left is this. Are you going to let his silence keep writing the story of your worth? Or are you going to pick up that pen yourself? Answer that honestly, and everything else becomes clear. If this landed somewhere real for you, drop a comment below and tell me where you are. Option 1, 2, or 3. Hit like if you've been reading his silence as something it was never meant to be. And subscribe if you are done letting someone else's unspoken feelings decide how you feel about yourself. Because the woman this video was really talking to doesn't sit around waiting to be chosen. She builds something worth choosing and decides for herself who deserves to be part of it.